Welcome back to Curiosity Class, the podcast where we break down complex topics into easy to understand ideas and bite-sized pieces. My name is Jeff Album, and I've been a curious person my entire life. Inspired by Albert Einstein's quote, "If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough," we aim to make learning accessible and engaging. On this show, we're going to bring you experts from various fields, ranging from personal finance to physics, to help you understand everything from 401ks to how airplanes fly. So let's dive in and satisfy our curiosity together. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Curiosity Class. Today, we're going to be doing a little bit of a controversial topic. Should you buy or rent your house? Oh, dun, dun, dun. If you want the TLDR, the answer is, it depends. And that's what we're going to walk through today. So take a listen and let's get started and dive in and see if you should buy or rent a house. Let's see what's going on. Alrighty. So should you buy or rent your house? This is a common question I think everyone asks and everyone has a very strong opinion about. The answer is it depends. So I want to say that up front before I get started that this question is very personal, as all things in personal finance. Personal finance is personal. So whatever I may say here is not a judgment on anyone who chooses to do something different. This is just me explaining my thought process, and I'd love to be proven wrong. I have these conversations all the time with friends and peers and colleagues, and sometimes I am proven wrong. And at the end, I'll kind of share my best arguments for why you should do one or the other above and beyond the math, because the point of this episode is to go through the math. So just to show some reasonable numbers for a typical home. And obviously, this depends a lot on where you live, what type of house you want, if you have an apartment or a house or whatever. So there's a lot of ifs here. So this is by no means all. This does not encompass everything, but this is just one person's thoughts and ideas. So don't be too harsh in the comments, please. So anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a house in Austin, Texas that is for sale, and then a house in a similar neighborhood that's for rent. We're going to compare and then walk through the numbers of like, hey, how much does it cost to buy a house? And then keep up on a monthly basis versus how much does it cost to rent a house and keep up on a monthly basis. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen as always. Okay, so this is a house for sale in Austin, Texas. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,200 square foot home, and it's going for $500,000. Now, this is in a decent neighborhood in Austin. It's pretty good. It's fairly central. It's not the most central. It's not the least central. So it's like a very, what I would call like a middle of the road. I think what used to be called starter home, which now feels a little bit less and less like a place you start. So let's dive into some of the numbers here. So it's listed for $500,000. And a couple of the numbers to look for are the property tax and insurance. So if we scroll down, it shows the property tax was $9,000 in 2024, and it's about $550 every month, and home insurance is about $150 every month. So that's the house to buy. Now, a house in a similar neighborhood that is for rent is the following. This is a house in a similar neighborhood. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,200 square foot house that's renting for $2,500 a month. So those are the numbers that we're going to use to do our analysis. So now let's jump into the spreadsheet. Okay, let's dive in here. So this is our spreadsheet. Purchase price of $500,000. This is on the buy side. So let's take a look. So these are our loan assumptions. So let's assume you put 20% down, which is $100,000, which is a sizable chunk of change, obviously. That leaves your loan amount to be $400,000, and we're going to assume that your interest rate that you could get this interest rate. I actually don't know if this is true. I've never bought a primary residence, so I don't know if this is accurate, but this feels accurate for November 2025. This actually might be a little on the low side. So if anything, it might be closer to 7%, but let's just call it 6.5. And let's say you're going to do a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So with a 6.5% interest rate and a $100,000 down payment, your monthly payment, including principal and interest, is about $2,500. Okay. Taxes we got from Zillow is $566 a month. Insurance we got is $150 a month. Now, there's some other things that you have to do when you own a house. So if your air conditioner breaks, that's on you. You don't have a landlord to call and say, hey, fix my AC. If you have a leak, you have to fix that. So it's prudent to save money aside every month for these maintenance expenses that will inherently come up. So I kind of guesstimated here. I used 0.5% of the purchase price. And this is very back of the napkin. Like some houses, like an air conditioning costs the same, whether it's a really expensive house or really non-expensive house. So that's not really true that you can just use a percentage, but I did it just because I felt like $500 a month was a little aggressive. So I called it 250 because I was like, well, you should save something, but how much to save is kind of subjective. But the more important thing to know is like, okay, I need to save something. Same thing for CapEx, which is capital expenditures. When you buy a house, you're responsible for things like the roof, right? And so roofs have a useful life. So there's a certain point in time when you need to get a new roof, which is very expensive. So it's prudent to put money aside every month so that when those big expenses happen, you're ready and you're not caught like, oh snap, I owe $15,000 and like I don't have that, and you need a new roof. So that's what I put that here. And then utilities. So you pay for utilities. Utilities you also pay for on the rent side, which we'll go into in a sec. So all of a sudden, your $2,500 monthly payment, when you add taxes and insurance plus maintenance, capex, and utilities, is a little over $4,000 every month that you owe. So now let's dive in and see what happens on the rental side. So when you rent that house, your rent is $2,500, and you don't owe any taxes, you don't have any insurance costs, you don't have any maintenance costs, and you don't have any capex costs. You do still have utilities, so I said that was the same. And so now this line item is kind of interesting because I think a lot of people forget about this one. But if you're renting, you are not using your down payment money, right? You have not used your down payment. So if you were to put that down payment of 100 grand and get a measly 3% return, which in November 2025 you can get in most savings accounts, and you divide that by 12, which is on a monthly basis, that's $250 in additional income that you're receiving. So what I did was I said, okay, you owe $2,500 a month. You also owe utilities, that's $2,800. But then we're going to subtract the $250 in income that you're getting. So this is your net total cash outlay if we're comparing apples to apples. So it's $2,550 as opposed to $4,000. Now, if you want to say, well, I might not have $100,000, so show me what that looks like if I don't have $100,000 in a savings account. So if we get rid of that, it's $2,800. So still about a $1,300 swing to rent versus buy. So there's the math. I'm going to stop sharing, and now I'm sure I've sufficiently upset a lot of people. So a couple things to say about this decision. As all things personal finance, this is a personal decision, and it varies very much so person to person. This is not like this is the right way. I personally believe that renting a house for me and my wife currently is the best financial decision that we can make because it allows us to save more money on a monthly basis. Now, I know like half of you out there are screaming, what about building equity? What about the tax advantages and write-offs and stuff? All true things. The equity conversation is a little bit more difficult because if you look at the way mortgages and loans work, the majority of time in the first 5 to 7 years, most of your payment is going towards interest. I might do a whole other episode about this, about like how amortization works, because it's really fascinating and like not intuitive whatsoever. But basically, when you're making your payment of $2,500 or whatever every month, most of that money is going towards paying interest, not principal, at the beginning of the loan. Towards the end of the loan, it's the opposite. So even though your payment is fixed every month, that's what fixed rate means. Your payment is the same. The proportion of that payment is different every month. So it starts off mostly interest, less principal, and then over time changes in proportion. So by the end of the loan, you're paying off mostly principal, less interest. That's a whole episode into it of itself. It's a very fascinating topic that I very much love. But basically, the answer to the building equity thing is if you're planning on living there for a long time, like more than 7 years, you're right, you are building equity. So that is something to consider. I have never lived anywhere for more than 2 years, I think is the most I've lived, like ever since I moved out of my parents' house. So for me, that doesn't really apply. Um, the other argument I hear a lot is tax benefits. You do get to write off your the amount you pay in interest on your loan. So that is a tax write off you get as a homeowner, and something to consider for sure. But that's something that, like, at least for me personally, you get that once a year in your tax refund. I like to know, like, okay, on a monthly basis, what are my costs? Because if my cost is $1,300 more every month, but I get a check for $5,000 once a year, to me, that's not worth it personally. That might be very much worth it to some other people. Now, what are the pros to owning, of which there are many? I think the best argument to own a home, obviously, if you can afford it, is the feeling of permanence you have, right? You're setting down roots, you own it. There's not a thought of, oh, what happens when our lease is up in a year? Like I said, we currently rent with some good friends who own, and the best argument that they've said is like, look, the emotional component of knowing where we are and where we're going to be and where we're going to raise a family, and like, we're not moving, like we're not planning on moving in the near future, is really beautiful. And I think that's an amazing point. And I think the best point to make when owning a home. So I think that's kind of both arguments. Again, I just don't like it when the argument is, oh, buying a house is the best financial investment decision that you can make, because I don't think that that's necessarily true, especially with really high interest rates. So that being said, I hope I didn't offend anybody too much. If you like this, please let me know. If you want more of this type of stuff, please let me know. And if you disagree, please let me know. I'd love to have you on and have a conversation about where I went wrong, or what I would love to learn and hear from you. What is the best reason to own a home? As always, thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everybody.